Hi, this is Dana. Welcome on my channel, and here I speak about spiritual warfare. In this video, God has guided me to talk about how you detach from ego, basically, because this is really, really important. Much of the manipulation of the ego is being done on your subconscious level, and there are many triggers built in along the way throughout your life. So they will not come to you and say to you bluntly, but they will do manipulation through levitation on your subconscious level. Also programming, of course. And you will end up holding as very important issues, people, values, which in fact do not matter to you and shouldn't matter to you, or shouldn't matter this much to influence life-changing decisions. So the simple answer is a higher perspective. When you hold a higher perspective over things, when you detach from the situation, from the people, and so on, then you can see the reasoning behind that specific topic, right? You can see, for example, there's one thing to understand the causal relations. Why is that so? Then you depersonalize the action which was taken against you. So you must depersonalize, detach, understand the deeper processes at play. Why this came about, how this came about, who is manipulating and creating this situation. Because most times, I would say all times, all of these bondages, bondage creation, and all of this war is being manipulated by somebody behind scenes. So if you detach and see the higher perspective and which are the causal relations, why that individual is doing that, who is manipulating him to do this, how that came about in that circumstance, then you are able to evaluate another very important thing, namely the consequences of your choice. So for me, I'll give you my example. These are the most important factors which lead my decision making. A deeper understanding of causal relations, of who's manipulating and who created this situation, why they created it, what they are after to get from that situation or from me. A higher understanding of all of that and the causal relations and all the factors at play, a strategy that is carried on through that particular situation. And then, on the other hand, so at this point, you can already make a decision of response, but then before you make it final, think of consequences. And I'll give you an example from the previous video. I explained in the previous video, I gave an example in which I gave to God the power to make a decision, which was my right to make. It was just, and it was my right according to spiritual laws, that I make the decision what to happen with those individuals. And I was entitled to anything because I won, and because there was a transfer of gifts, so I could make any decision. Right? And the spirit that was involved in that spiritual fighting was going to listen to my decision. So nobody could challenge my decision. I was entitled to make any decision. But analyzing the consequences of this, basically, was that led me to give to God this power to make the decision. Why? Because I knew if I make the decision, the ego will be playing a role. Because what the fuck you mean? You destroyed my life. You've been trying to kill me, literally, physically. I've been through so much pain physically, both me and Lucky, for the last so-and-so time, in my own home. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on how much harm they've done me, right? But I was particularly conscious that for example, let's say I would have decided that individual should have died, or some of those individuals should have died, because this is what they sent to me repeatedly. So for a full week, 24 hours a day continuously. And basically, the spirit of that individual would have been trapped. So all the others that would have survived from this attack would have used him in necromancy to continue to carry on attacks. That individual was a soul from my lineage. That means whatever happened to him or whatever he did or created or so on, or through him or in his name, was darkness which was weighing down my entire lineage, including me. Okay? So the consequences of this, besides the ego decision and the satisfaction that you did a tit for tat and you paid back somebody who harmed you and so on, the consequences though were too big and too dramatic and too negative for everybody else involved, for me, for God's strategy of ascension, for my lineage, and so on, right? I didn't give him anything, actually. I decided, okay, I'm gonna pull out this jerk out of the equation, and this is just gonna be between me and God. God knows how much harm he's done to me. So I claim justice and judgment for God to give me justice. I ask Jesus to oversee the process to make sure that my interest is taken in consideration. But I'm not going to make a decision out of ego because I want to pay back or because I want to show that I won against the principality and now I have a new gift. So I want to prove to everyone to fear me, who I am, and so, which was also an ego thing, which many of them do. They just get a gift, and because of that, they start playing around with that gift, doing a lot of harm, just to prove to everyone who they are, and everybody to fear them. But they never think of the consequences. So I decided, oh, somebody is very angry with all of this that I'm saying. So I decided that I give to God this gift, first because I knew this was something very important to God, and of course because God has been next to me and has been pulling me out of all of this madness and helping me get through it. So I said, this is my gift to you. So I will not regret later that I made a decision out of ego, to which maybe I was entitled because I suffered a lot, and because they have been crazy enough to hunt me for years and years and years and to do the most outrageous things against me. So I was entitled to do whatever at that point in time anybody from my lineage would have understood, any decision that I would have taken, considering what they have done. But I didn't want to make a decision, and I actually said this to God. I said, this is my gift to you. You make this decision. So I will not be burdened by the idea that I made a decision out of ego, and then that decision created a blockage in your ascension plan, or created a burden for my entire lineage, or even for myself later on, and so on and so on. And this is the perfect example, as I said before, of pulling back, understanding all, because also I saw, because I see spirits, so I'm a seer, so I saw the crazy bastard who whispered in the ear of the other one. So I understood that this is played. Later on I understood it was exactly like I imagined. There were many factors involved and many people that actually were playing on that decision to make sure that the salvation doesn't happen, right? This is why I gave to God the power to make the decision, because there are many, I mean, it takes a long time for you to look at the situation, particularly when you're talking about people who are attacking you, and to understand what is behind it. I worked with God a lot. I do not expose in my videos on my work all that I work with God. God has been showing me, and I've been asking and researching always every situation. And I've been asking, and God is showing to me how that came about, what events in current life happening in that individual's life that led him to do this. How come he became programmed to do this type of attack and not a different type of attack? What does it mean? What kind of forces work through him? What is the agenda of the forces? What is the agenda of the people? Then God is showing to me previous lifetimes. How so I usually research a lot, but this is part of the way I work actually. In my profession as well, I used to do a lot of research before I would give a verdict, an evaluation, and a recommendation for a decision making. I would spend days and nights of research, and only when I felt that I have everything covered throughout history and so on, then I will make a final decision and so on. So basically, to deal with ego, my personal experience, this is my way of doing things, is that you need to have a higher perspective of the situation, very deep understanding based on research of the forces at play, of the causal relations that are involved, of the agendas that are involved from different actors, right? And then, of course, a very thorough analysis of the consequences of that decision. So if I decide this, what happens? If I decide this, what happens? If I decide this, what happens? And many times you will see that there is a very easy answer which will serve your ego, will boost your self-confidence maybe, because you basically had a confrontation and you succeeded to put them in their place, right? But then you need to know that the long-term consequences or the broader consequences of that do not turn around you, do not turn around to harm you or to harm somebody else, because you might be facilitating more harm through a decision which might be legitimate for a short-term situation, like is this case. So if I would have decided that they would die, would have been good for me because they couldn't attack me anymore, so I could have moved on in the immediate future, right? But in the long-term future, that would have meant a spirit of somebody from my lineage trapped in necromancy being used against me and others, for example. And many other consequences, which I will not detail now because I'm not talking the case study. I'm just giving an example. So there are many, many consequences that derived from that, right? This is why I decided that God should make that decision, because I knew some situations are actually damn if you do, damn if you don't. So it's bad either way, and of course I don't budge to make a decision. I can make decisions, but this particular decision, I decided to give power to God to make that decision because the consequences were too big, and because I knew that God cares particularly about this individual to save him and so on and so forth. This is very important to keep in mind. Again, it's not an issue for me to make decisions. I'm used with making decisions, and I can easily make decisions. But the fact of the matter is, you need to make sure that you cover everything, that you have the entire information at hand when you do this. Again, higher perspective, very thorough research to understand everything that is at play. And I'll give you one more example so you will understand about decision making. I was in 2009, I was posted abroad through my work in Germany, Berlin. So I was working there I was already there 2 years almost. And I wanted to come home. So I had a very deep, I'm not going to enter into these details now. The point is, I really, really wanted to go back to Romania. Much of it, actually, and I actually told during confession at the time to my priest, I said, I don't understand why I cannot stay there. I'm so unhappy. And actually, later on, I learned somebody did a binding on my soul level. So they binded themselves at my soul level. And I told my priest, but he wouldn't tell me what happens. I said, I feel such a deep soul pain with no reason whatsoever. I'm in a very good situation professionally. I'm in a best possible situation financially considering the circumstances. So I from career perspective is perfect. I'm abroad, so I really, from personal perspective, I'm in perfect situation because I wanted to leave Romania, to just have a fresh beginning in a different place with different people, not to be around the same thing. So I don't understand why. I have no rational reason to be unhappy, but I feel like somebody reaches out inside of me and pulls out my soul. It's so painful, and I don't understand why. Anyhow, he wouldn't explain to me what happens. Later on, when I learned spirituality, I learned that somebody did a binding. They binded themselves at my soul. This is why what I was feeling, such a painful. But anyhow, I wanted to come back. So I kept making demarches to come back. And the weird thing, many individuals from Romania, from MFA, would reach out, call me, and make offers to me. If you come back now, we can put you in this position, we can put you in this position, you can take a leadership role, you can do this, you can do that. And some of them I accepted, but they wouldn't come through. Everything will basically fall in the very last minute. So like for a year and a half, things happened this way. So it was really peculiar to me. Why I don't succeed to go back home? I don't understand. I have offers, but even if I accept some of them, they don't come through. I myself make demarches, everything falls down. Why I cannot go home? I came home on vacation for 2 weeks on my birthday. And of course, I used to do this back in the day. I went to take communion for my birthday. And confessing to my priest knew that I wanted to come back. I explained to him all of this. And he asked me, okay, tomorrow is your birthday. You are taking communion. I will pray for you. What you want me to pray for, Dana? What you want me to pray for you? Should I pray to God that you come back home? And because I already suspecting, I was suspicious to all of these patterns which were repeating. I said, you know what? I don't know what is going on with this coming back home. Can you please ask God that His will be done regarding me returning home? Because I was in the middle of negotiation with the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time about taking a leadership position in MFA and returning to Romania. So I already had the negotiation and discussion before my birthday. I was taking communion on my birthday, and the same day I was supposed to meet the minister, and the final decision will be made. And I was not very pleased with the topics that he wanted me to cover. Anyhow, the point is, I said to the priest this. I said, can you ask God, please, that his decision will be made in this circumstance? Because I'm like, now I don't even know. I want to come back home, but I'm not that pleased with the topics that he wants me to cover. And those are files which I don't necessarily want to work on. But on the other hand, it's been so long since every attempt to come home failed. So I think maybe I should just take whatever topics he wants me and just come back and just hear what's going on. I was confused at this point, right? And this happened, right? So the priest said, okay, I will pray exactly like you said. So my birthday comes, I take communion, And later the same day, I was supposed to meet the minister and to make a final decision together. If I accept the topics he proposed to me, or if he switches and he gives me the files I wanted to take. And I did this, and I tell you, the same day, the minister himself was withdrawn from the ministerial position. So basically, I messaged him, what time should I come to the office to meet you? And he says, I'm not a minister anymore. Half an hour ago, the government withdrew and I'm not a minister anymore. So we can meet to have a coffee, but I cannot continue the negotiation with you because I'm not in that position anymore. So to me, it was like, wow, how can this happen? This is impossible. Every single time when I had something planned and negotiated and coming close to fruition in order for me to return, somehow all falls back, all is destroyed. And indeed, when I started my spiritual fighting, I learned that was a way for them to trap me. It was bad to come back, and God wanted me to stay away, stay abroad, basically. Basically, this was the message that God was trying to send to me: stay the fuck where you are, because it's not good for you to return. I did come back anyhow. I didn't get the message even then, but it did shook me, to be very honest. So this is why I say to you, because there are many consequences and many things behind the scenes. And of course, God has shown to me the reason why I didn't want you to come back that time was because this and this and this was planned against you. This and these individuals were hunting you, were after you. While you are on a totally different soil and country and astral space, they don't have the same power over you. Even the energetic attacks, they cannot do illegal things against you while you are in a different astral space, unless those in charge of protection in that astral space agrees with them and makes a deal against you. But you can be safer in a totally different astral space. This is also why I actually wrote this on my prophetic writings. This is also why relocation is important many times, because there are certain bondages which are valid only on the astral space of that country where you are, where they were created, because many of them are illegal, and they cannot create them in a totally different astral space because they will be observed by others. They can only create them in a totally different astral space if the local authorities from that astral space works with them against you. But you stand more chances that other people see it and help you. So this is why I advocated relocation. Anyhow, back to the ego thing and higher perspective. So for me, the decision was very simple. I wanted to return to Romania because I didn't feel well there. I didn't, with no reason, no rational reason, from all perspectives, professionally, financially, and so on, and even personally, everything was in my advantage there, where I was. But I was feeling very sick and I didn't enjoy my life. Later on, I learned they did soul binding on me. So this is why I was feeling this way. That proved to me, that time proved to me that there are situations. And as I returned to Romania, I saw myself, how things got worse, I realized I made a mistake and I should have stayed there in Berlin. I realized, but it was too late already. This is why it's important that sometimes, that first of all, you work close with God, but sometimes you leave it to God. And you don't play on ego when you make decisions, but if you really have to make a decision, you make it. But always keep in mind, and personally, many times I include this in my requests or prayers or so on, namely that I ask Jesus to oversee my decisions, or I ask God to oversee my decision, just because you must understand the limitations of being in human embodiment. This is a human embodiment. There are limitations. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be God himself. If you're embodying, if you're in human embodiment, there are limitations here. Of course, on soul level, you still preserve your identity, powers, and gifts. But still, you're in human incarnation. Regardless who you are, and this goes for all the crazy people who, because they claim to be this deity and that deity, they imagine that they can do whatever. No, you can't. You're in human incarnation. This is why all the spiritual fighting, you should refer to God. And you should leave the ego out of it. Because you see how ego is being played. There are humans, like the one that I mentioned in last message, last video's example. There are humans who actually are very arrogant and ego-driven in front of God, and they keep saying, "I'm this and that. I'm sovereign. I have my own power, my own." But then they don't budge to worship humans. This is only programming on them. This is ego driven. This is ego being manipulated and making you turn against God. So you have no issue to worship a human just because that human promised to give you a house or a car or money or something. But you have issues to worship God. And you become already very ego driven and arrogant to God. I mean, you need to, God has shown to me all of this, has shown to me many examples in which, look at this guy, look what he says. And I was outraged. I was like, how come he's saying this to you? And God then would lift the veil and will show me, look, do you see that one whispering in his ear this? Do you see that one is sending this attack to him? Do you see that one? It's already body snitching. This man is not speaking. And because I see spirits, God will show me. Do you see? It's a spirit within him who speaks. It's not him. And the individual, like I said in another video when I explained about that woman being charged in a court of law, when your body snitched, your body and your identity looks like you're unconscious, almost like you are dead. Like, how do you say this? Sleepwalking, like sleepwalking. This is how it's shown to me in astral. And there's a spirit which uses your body. That's the body snitching. So God has shown to me all of this, and I finally understood when he started revealing all of this to me in spiritual fighting that many times, it's more important not to react, because it was a body snitching, was a spirit who was speaking on behalf of that individual. That individual was totally unconscious, and basically God could have punished the individual, but would have gotten no result because it was not the individual who was doing it. It was the spirit. But it was the responsibility of that individual to fight the spirit which was body snitching him. This is why the fact you came to 3D, to fight against these forces, not to allow them to use you. Anyhow, I'm gonna stop here because this is long enough. I hope I was clear enough. I gave that example with the decision making about me returning from Berlin to Bucharest, because that was, although I did at that point in time, I didn't have as much spiritual knowledge as I do now, but that was very obvious for me that I made the wrong decision, and that it also was very obvious to me and to the priest that God was trying to warn me, and to tell me, stay the fuck there, don't return here, this is not where you should be. And after I returned, considering what happened to me after I returned, I started understanding. I said, that was clearly a message from God. I shouldn't have returned. I should have just stayed there. But again, I learned, of course, that. And then as I started spiritual fighting, I understood much more. And then I started doing much more research. And this is my final conclusion and recommendation on this topic. Do thorough research. Detach from the situation, depersonalize, try to understand the situation, try to understand each actor involved. And when I say understand, that means understand the human dimension, but I understand also the spiritual dimension. Which forces work through him? How did those forces get to work through that individual? What were the events in this lifetime or the agendas against him? Who stands what to win if that individual does harm to you? And you will see that many times it's actually a war between you and a totally different person or totally different force, which is not visible in the conflict. Somebody who's behind scene who creates all of that. And the individual that is attacking you is just, somebody being used against you in order to make you focus on a lower level, not to see the true enemy who is actually orchestrating all of that against you. Okay, so so do this. Try to understand the causal relations, which are the actors, what agendas they have against whom, what happened in this lifetime, what happened in other lifetimes. And before you make the final decision, do thorough analysis and research what are the consequences for each type of decision that you would make. If you do all of this, this should help you get rid of the ego. This should help you stay safe in wise decisions for yourself and for everybody else involved. Okay, I'm gonna stop here because this is already too long.